Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randirhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
Wow. There is this big investigation that has been an investigation between the Washington Post and CBS News 60 Minutes. The reporters for the Washington Post, Scott Hyman and Lenny Bernstein, have joined up with CBS News and 60 Minutes in order to show you what the F goes on inside your government, even when it comes to, or especially when it comes to, this opioid addiction crisis that we have in this country. This is really an amazing story, and it goes right to what Colin Kaepernick is protesting, equal justice under law. I mean, that is why the Harvey Weinstein, the Donald Trumps, this is the reason why very rich and very powerful people, industries, can hire the best lawyers, lobbyists, and they can live in a different America than people who don't have lobbyists, people who can't afford high-priced attorneys, okay? The people who have to take it upon themselves to figure out what a peaceful protest should look like and sound like and when to do it and where to do it so that it causes some discomfort, but mostly it causes thought. Okay, it causes reflection. It causes people to look inside and to say, yes, this is happening and it's wrong. So, for instance, if you have somebody who's selling pills on the street, or somebody who was crack addicted during the 80s and 90s, they are probably in jail. But if you have distributors of the same synthetic opioids or the same kind of, life-ruining substances, and they are shielded under a corporate emblem, and they make billions the same way drug dealers do, but they are shielded by a corporate emblem, and they have access to lobbyists, they have access to lawyers, they have access to the lawmakers, then they simply change the law. Same with Wall Street. Wall Street decided that it wanted to take the savings and loan, which is a very secure place for people to put their money, and merge it with investment banking, which is people who want to risk their money. That's where they put their money because they are willing to take more risk. And they merged them together without you knowing, and you lost your house, even though you weren't gambling with your house. But they got away with it because the law changed, because the regulations changed, the deregulation changed, all these things are the same thing. Colin Kaepernick trying to promote equal justice. That's the thing that everybody hears about and sees, and the president calls him a son of a bitch. Then I showed you a little piece of a Nazi film, which was clearly American Nazis gathered at Madison Square Garden with American flags flying, saying the Pledge of Allegiance, singing the national anthem, but arguing for a fascist form of government, same as his people do, white supremacist, white nationalism, fascism, same as Steve Bannon. Okay, so you have all these things. You have the Weinsteins and the Trumps of the world, where if you have, a high school kid who is 17 years old and he's in love with a girl who's, a grade behind him, he will have to register as a sex offender and stay registered as a sex offender for the rest of his life. Again, the drug dealers, right? We all know there's a different justice system for people who sell pills on the street than the people who sell pills to go on the street. Now, last night, the Washington Post and 60 Minutes got together, and last night, this very deeply reported story by Scott Hyam and Lenny Bernstein in partnership with 60 Minutes raises some of the biggest questions that you will ever have to answer, including how much industry involvement in crafting legislation is too much. Is Congress doing anything to address the prescription drug epidemic, anything at all? Or are lawmakers beholden to these drug companies who are making billions of dollars, as drug dealers do, by selling painkillers? I mean, some of this is just so heartbreaking. You have towns of, maybe 290 people, and in a period of 5 years, they have received 7 million pills. And then you find out, this is an amazing story, that the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, was headed up by a man who cared so much about this, that he was actually using the law that was written as it was written to crack down on these distributors, as he named. Okay, he named them. And he was cracking down on them, and he was able to bring, tons of prosecutions, successful prosecutions. And these pharmaceutical companies were getting big fines, big fines. They got tired of the big fine. I mean, nobody went to jail, right? Don't get me wrong. We're not that democratic, right? So nobody goes to jail for this, but they were paying millions of dollars in fines. And so the drug companies got tired of paying millions of dollars in fines. And the drug companies instead said, why don't we just take, the guys inside the DEA who know how to prosecute these cases, and we'll hire them. And when they come to work for us, we'll pay them, tons and tons of money. They'll never make that working for the government, but they know where the hole in the law is. They know how the law is being used against us. And if we just push them through the revolving door and put them on our team, they can fix the law. They can change the law so that the DEA won't be able to prosecute us anymore. And that's exactly what happened. You had a guy, his name is Joseph Renazzisi. Joseph Renazzisi was the head of the DEA's investigative unit, and he was the guy who was able to bring all these successful prosecutions. He had a whole litigation team at the DEA that was able to guide him through the litigation that was necessary in order to get these drug distributors, drug manufacturers, the chain stores that sell them, the mom and pops, all of it. And he was successful. This sounds to me just like the Magnitsky story, because you're not even going to believe this, but because Razanassi was so able to do this, and because the drug distributors got so sick of him being successful, they decided to do two things. They picked off his litigators. They hired them in the private sector, paid them tons more than they were making working for the government, busting up these distribution centers. And they went after Joseph Renazzisi. They went after him. They didn't put him on trial, but they investigated him. Congress investigated him, and they ruined his life. They ruined his career. He was in charge of 600 DEA agents, and now he's got 0 DEA agents, and he just resigned. He just left. Now, what's really fascinating is Trump's pick for drug czar. What happened in Congress was they got lobbied very heavily by these former DEA agents who they hired. These distributors hired them. Drugstore chains hired them. They knew how the law worked, so they pulled them away. And ever since the DEA was cracking down on the opioid industry, the drug companies have hired dozens and dozens and dozens of DEA officials, most of them from the division that regulated the drug industry. They gave them big, big money and told them, lobby Congress, here's some money, throw it around Congress, and get this law changed, because you know that under the current law, we can be prosecuted, and we don't want to be prosecuted. So change the law. These former DEA officials and agents did go to work for these private lobby shops and law firms. They did lobby Congress. They gave Congress millions of dollars, spread it around, mostly to a guy from Pennsylvania. If you live in Tom Marino's district in Pennsylvania, you know you have an opioid crisis, and you should only know that Tom Marino, the Pennsylvania Republican, who Trump is now considering for drug czar, is the exact person that wrote this legislation that stopped the DEA from being able to prosecute the drug distributors, the drug companies, the chain drugstores, the mom and pop drugstores that were ordering 7-8 million pills. Okay, so Tom Marino wrote this piece of legislation. If you are in Marsha Blackburn's district, from Tennessee, she now wants to replace Corker, because Corker's not going to Bob Corker is not going to run again. She wants to go to the Senate now. Marsha Blackburn was a co-sponsor of this piece of swill legislation so that you can't prosecute the distributors of drugs in this country if they're corporate distributors. You know, if they're individuals, sure, yeah, you go to jail. But if you're corporate, and they gave her millions of dollars. And in the Senate, if you're in Utah, you can't even drink, really. Right? Alcohol is practically illegal there. Or in Hatch, he negotiated the final version of this bill to close the loophole. It's not even a loophole, to change the law so that we couldn't prosecute distributors. They used procedure. They passed it without any debate. They passed it without any vote. It was just unanimous consent in the House, unanimous consent in the Senate, and then it went to the president's desk and Barack Obama signed it. And now the DEA cannot prosecute the drug companies that distribute these pills into your community, into your pharmacy, all because of a little bit of money. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.